Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. Joining us today for part 2 of our exclusive in-depth discussion on the issues and controversies around e-cigarettes is Professor Stanton Glantz, arguably the most well-known tobacco control activist in the world. He is also an ardent critic of e-cigarettes, eternally frustrating vaping supporters and public health colleagues with his blunt talk and combative style honed over the years in the trenches fighting the war against big tobacco. Professor Glantz, thanks for joining us. Picking up where we left off in part 1, you made several points about dual use, which is when people use e-cigarettes and continue to smoke at the same time. Do you know why that happens?
Exactly why isn't totally clear. I think one reason is because e-cigarettes are promoted as a way to use recreational nicotine in places where smoking has been banned. And there's a very well-developed literature, some of which we contributed to, showing that clean indoor air laws and smoke-free environments, smoke-free homes, make it easier for people to quit smoking. And the e-cigarettes are blunting that effect.
Professor Glantz, if an adult smoker walked into your office and made a convincing argument that they would not become a dual user, would you recommend e-cigarettes as an option to quit smoking?
No.
And why not?
We have a bunch of therapies, Chantix, which you mentioned, other therapies that have gone through rigorous testing and approval by the government, and which work. And people should use things that are demonstrated to work. If the e-cigarette companies wanted to go out and do the clinical trials and actually test them to see if they work for smoking cessation and submit the evidence to the US FDA or the corresponding Canadian authorities, fine, let them.
Well, you've opened Pandora's box mentioning the FDA. Vaping advocates say the new deeming regulations the FDA just put into effect in the US are going to devastate the industry.
Well, I've been very critical of the FDA law from the beginning. I didn't even want it, okay? But what the law did, a political compromise that was made in the law, was that any product that was on the market as of February 15th, 2007 is grandfathered in.
But that's unfair, isn't it?
Well, that's politics, and the whole argument that's been made for the FDA law is that any new product that comes on the market after that has to go through pre-market review and be shown to have net public health benefit. I can tell you a lot of the people at the FDA are very sympathetic to the whole harm reduction argument and the possibility that e-cigarettes might lead people to switch to a less risky product. They're way more pro-harm reduction than I am. But the point is that before they allow that, you should have to present some evidence to them. And while an e-cigarette is not as dangerous as a cigarette, it's still pretty dangerous.
Professor Glantz, you acknowledge e-cigarettes are not as dangerous as cigarettes, yet the FDA's grandfather clause leaves cigarettes currently on the market untouched. Big tobacco doesn't need to prove cigarettes have a net health benefit, and how could they? It's proven they kill. So how is the grandfather clause fair in regards to e-cigarettes?
If you came to me and said, did I like that grandfather date that was written into the FDA law, the 2007? No, I didn't like the FDA law. I thought there were too many compromises with big tobacco in that law, and I still think that. But the fact is, that's what the law is. And as people have gone into this business, they've gone into it knowing that was what the law was. And so I, frankly, am tired of hearing them whining about it.
Professor Glantz, I guarantee viewers are throwing objects at their monitors right now.
Well, I'm sorry that they're unhappy.
Professor Glantz, a lot of vapers, the regular Joes out there, they know and respect what you did in the battle against big tobacco, and they see you now fighting big sugar. They expected you to be an ally, and yet you're one of the loudest voices against vaping. They can't put it all together in their minds, and they're kind of hurt. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I know, I've heard that. The thing they're ignoring is that big tobacco is pretty much taking over the e-cigarette business anyway. And in fact, when you go back and look at the problem we have with kids, that's probably not much due to the vape shops and the people you're talking about. Kid use of e-cigarettes was kind of marginal for a long time. It was only when the big corporations got into the business, started advertising on television and the radio, going into the internet, and bringing modern mass marketing and product development into the market that we saw the increase in use by kids. So, I mean, my personal view is that if all we had were these mom and pop vape shops out there, it probably would be, you'd have a little niche market with a few enthusiasts, probably the people who are trying to quit smoking, and, it probably wouldn't be worth bothering with, frankly, from a public health point of view.
Speaking of public health, Professor Glantz, you seem to be in a disagreement with some of your public health colleagues over the potential dangers of e-cigarettes. As RegWatch reported last spring, the Royal College of Physicians in the UK released a groundbreaking report which could only be characterized as a ringing endorsement of e-cigarettes. In its 200-page report titled Nicotine Without Smoke, the RCP makes some sweeping conclusions, including nicotine alone is not carcinogenic, and compared to continued smoking, nicotine use in e-cigarettes is of minimal consequence. The report also states there is no evidence e-cigarette use has resulted in the renormalization of smoking, or that vaping serves as a gateway for never smokers, including young people, to pick up the habit. Finally, Professor Glantz, Public Health England, the nation's top health protection agency, released an evidence report last year stating e-cigarettes are 95% less harmful than normal cigarettes. How do you explain such a massive discrepancy between your assessment of e-cigarettes and that of public health officials in England?
I understand, and I have to say, and I mean, I know a lot of the people who wrote that report, they're friends of mine. I just can't figure out how they possibly drew those conclusions. And the most critical element of that is this claim that e-cigarette use is 95% less risky than cigarettes. Well, you as a critical thinker need to track back to where that number came from. And where that number came from is a half a dozen self-described experts got together and sat around and decided it was 95% safer. If you read the original paper...
Are you referring to the Public Health England report from last year?
No, it was the one before that.
So you don't agree with the 95% number then?
I think it was a made-up number. If you go read the paper, which I've read, it has no evidence whatsoever in it. It was a group of people, some of whom have financial conflicts of interest, got together and just picked it. It was kind of amazing to then see Public Health England uncritically just pick it up and repeat it. And it was even more shocking to see the Royal College of Physicians do it. But all I can say, they're just focused on cancer. And most smokers are not killed by cancer. They're killed by heart disease and non-cancer lung disease. And those reports paid absolutely no attention to that.
Finally, Professor Glantz, what's your bottom line on e-cigarettes?
If you ask me the question, do I think the world would be a better place if we didn't have any e-cigarettes? Yes, I do. I think e-cigarettes are making the cigarette epidemic worse. But the one great thing about what's going on in England, and I mean, I think those people, again, they're friends of mine. I've worked with some of them for years. I think they're absolutely nuts right now. But they're doing this wonderful experiment over there. You've got the government giving e-cigarettes out to people now through the National Health Service. And we'll come back in 2 or 3 years, and one of two things will have happened. It'll have worked and been tremendously successful in reducing smoking, in which case the rest of us can say, boy, we're so glad you were courageous enough to push forward and do this experiment and prove the rest of us wrong. Or we can say, thank God we didn't do that too. You've got a complete mess on your hands. And they're doing the experiment. We'll know in a couple of years.
So it's a matter of fingers crossed then?
Yeah. I mean, I wish them well. The thing is, if the thing in England works and it reduces disease and death and smoking and all of that, it's always easy for other people to say, okay, we're going to take our foot off the brake. But when you're dealing with a big industrialized product like this and creating a big industry behind it, once it's there, the genie is very hard to shove back in the bottle.
Well, that's it for this special edition of RegWatch. Before you head off, please like us on Facebook and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. For RegulatorWatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.